My greetings to everyone. I am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of corporate governance, today we will be talking more on models of corporate governance. Corporate governance is a fundamental pillar of effective organizational management, encompassing the structure, process and practices which a company is directed and controlled. Now, across the global business landscape, there are various models of corporate governance which have emerged reflecting the diverse cultural, regulatory and institutional context in which the companies operate. Now, these models, they shape the relationships between the key stakeholders, define the decision-making process and establish the mechanism for accountability, transparency within the organization. Now, let us talk about the different models. So, one prominent model of corporate governance is the Anglo-American model, which is commonly observed in the countries like United States of America and United Kingdom. Now, this model places a strong emphasis on the shareholder primacy with the primary goal of maximizing the shareholders' value. The board of directors in this model typically consists of majority of independent directors who oversee the management and make the strategic decisions, often guided by the principles of transparency and the shareholders' rights. Now, in contrast, the continental European model, prevalent in the countries like Germany, France, there are features a two-tier board structure. Now, this model separates the management and oversight the functions into two distinct boards, a management board responsible for day-to-day operations and a supervisory board which is tasked with the overseeing the management board activities. Now, this dual board structure aims to ensure a balance of power and facilitate a long-term strategic planning. Now comes the Asian model. The Asian model of corporate governance, witnessed in the countries like Japan and the South Korea, it emphasizes the long-term relationships and the consensus in decision-making process. And with the companies in these regions, they often engage in cross-shareholdings with other firms and the banks and the board of directors. They play a significant role in maintaining these interconnected relationships. Additionally, a strong focus on the corporate social responsibility and the sustainability is the characteristic of the Asian governance model. The Nordic model, which is another model of corporate governance, it is prevalent in the countries such as Sweden, Norway, which prioritizes a balanced approach that considers the interest of the shareholders, employees and the other stakeholders. The employee representation on the board is very common in this model, fostering the collaboration and inclusivity in the decision-making process. Furthermore, the Nordic companies often embrace the sustainability practices and the social responsibility initiatives as the integral component of their governance framework. Now come the next model. The family-owned business present a unique governance model where the family members often hold the key positions within the company. A decision-making in these organizations may be influenced by the family dynamics and the long-term family goals, highlighting the importance of balancing the family interest with the broader objectives of the business. Moreover, in certain regions, the state-owned enterprises, they operate under a governance model influenced by the government-owned ownership or the significant state involvement. The corporate governance in these entities is often shaped by the political considerations, the government policies, and the need to balance the commercial objectives with a broader societal interest. While these models of the corporate governance, they offer the valuable insights into how the companies are structured and governed. It is essential to recognize that the organizations may adopt a blend of elements from the different models based on their specific needs and operating environments. By understanding and implementing effective corporate governance practices, the companies can enhance the transparency, accountability, and the trust amongst the stakeholders, ultimately fostering the long-term sustainability and the success in today's dynamic business landscape. The Anglo-Saxon model of the corporate governance. Let's dwell into this model in depth. The Anglo-Saxon model, also known as the American model, is a system of the corporate governance which is prevalent in the countries like USA, UK, Canada, Australia, and to some extent India. Now, this model is characterized by certain key features, that is, the well-developed stock market. The Anglo-Saxon model is based on the market capitalism and is notable for its well-developed stock markets with the high liquidity and depth. This allows for the efficient trading of securities and the capital allocation. Next comes the shareholder primacy. In the Anglo-Saxon model, there is a strong emphasis on the shareholder primacy, which means that the interest of the shareholders are given the significant importance in decision-making process and the corporate governance practices. Now, the next is your emphasis on the financial performance. The companies following this model often prioritize the financial performance and the shareholder value maximization as the key objectives. The focus on profitability and the returns to the shareholders is a hallmark of this governance system. Let's see how the board structure works in this model. The corporate board in the Anglo-Saxon model typically consists of a combination of the executive and the independent directors who are responsible for overseeing the company's management and the strategic direction. Next comes the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework in the countries following the Anglo-Saxon model is often characterized by a principle-based approach that focuses on transparency, disclosure, and accountability to the shareholders. So overall, this model of corporate governance is known for its market-oriented approach, focus on the shareholder interest, and the strong emphasis on the financial performance and the transparency. So it is one of the prominent model of the corporate governance practiced in the Western business world. Now, let's see some advantages relating to this model. The first and the foremost is strong incentives for the management. Now, this particular model provides a strong incentives for the management to maximize the shareholder value, aligning the interest of the management with those of the shareholders, enhanced accountability and the transparency. The shareholders have a direct say in the strategic decisions, encouraging the transparency through the financial disclosure and operational information sharing. Now, this leads to improved accountability and responsiveness of the management to the shareholders. The next is your shareholder rights and influence. The shareholder can actively monitor and evaluate the company's performance and vote for on important matters like executive compensation, corporate structure, mergers and acquisitions, influencing the company's strategic direction. Next is your access to financial information. The shareholders have access to a wide range of financial information, enabling them to make informed decisions about their investments. The next is your legal protection for the shareholders. The shareholders have the right to use and sue the company if they feel their rights have been violated, providing the legal protection and the recourse in the case of the misconduct or the violations. Now, these advantages, they underscore the strength of Anglo-Saxon or the American model in promoting the shareholders' rights, transparency and accountability, and also the alignment of the interest between the management and the shareholders within the corporate governance framework. Now, let's see the application of this American model. Now, the application of this corporate model of the corporate governance involves several key aspects, and let's see one by one. The first application of the American model is the shareholder-centric focus. This American model, it prioritizes the shareholder return and the participation, making the shareholder the primary focus of the governance decisions. Now, this particular approach ensures that the governance structures are designed to maximize the shareholders' value and align the management decisions with the shareholder interest. The next is your independent shareholders. In this model, many independent shareholders invest in the companies for the financial gain and have a minimal involvement beyond their investments. The institutional investors, like the banks or the mutual funds, they also play a very significant and the pivotal role in this particular system, investing for the financial returns and having the flexibility to sell the shares based on the market conditions. The next is your board structure. The board of directors in this American model is a single team which is accountable to the shareholders with the minimal bureaucracy. The management personnel often sit on the board, ensuring a direct link between the management and the shareholders. The executive compensation is tied to their particular performance, emphasizing a short-term result to measure the success. The next is your shareholder engagement. The shareholders in the companies which are following this American model are regularly engaged by the board, provided with the opportunities to voice approval or disapproval and receive through reporting on the company's performance. Now, this active engagement ensures the transparency and the accountability within the governance structure. The next important application, if you talk about this American model, is the emphasis on the growth. The companies adopting this American model, they often experience a higher growth rate due to a streamlined relationships between the shareholders, the board of directors and the management. So, this streamlined approach allows for a quicker decision-making process and the fewer checks and balances, giving the leaders a more freedom to drive the growth initiatives. So, this application of the American model of corporate governance is characterized by its shareholder-centric nature and emphasis on the transparency and the accountability with the active shareholder engagement and the focus on driving the growth through the efficient decision-making process which is aligned with the shareholders' interest. Now, let's move on to our next model of the corporate governance, which is called as a German model. The German model of corporate governance, also known as a dual board system or a two-tier system, is a distinct in its structure and approach compared to a more widely known American model. Let's see what are the particular characteristics of the German model. The first and the foremost feature of the German model of corporate governance is a two-tier board system. The German model is characterized by a mandatory two-tier board system consisting of a board, management board, and a supervisory board. The management board is responsible for a day-to-day management of the company and is composed of the executive directors who are appointed by the supervisory boards. Now, the supervisory board is responsible for overseeing and monitoring the management board activities. So, it is made up of a non-executive directors and has no involvement in a daily business operations. The next is your co-determination. A distinctive feature of the German model is the system of co-determination, where the employees have a right to participate in the governance of the companies. Now, depending on the size of the company, up to half of the supervisory board may be composed of employee representatives, including the union representatives, as they have an important say in the management supervisory board. Now, this system is intended to ensure that the interests of the employees are taken into account in the company's decision-making process. Another important feature when you talk about a German model of corporate governance is a concentrated ownership. The German companies often have a concentrated ownership with the significant stakes held by the families, the state, banks, and other large investors. So, this can lead to a situation where a small number of shareholders have a significant influence on the corporate decisions making. That is, they have a concentrated ownership. The next is your role of the banks. The banks play a substantial role in the German corporate governance system. They are often the large shareholders and have a representation on the supervisory board. The banks can also exercise some proxy votes on behalf of the small investors at the general meeting, giving them some additional influence. Another important feature of the German model of corporate governance is a stakeholder orientation. The German model places a strong emphasis on the interest of all the stakeholders, including the shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and a broader community. The goal is to create a balance between these interests and to ensure the long-term stability and the success of the company. Next is your regulatory framework. The corporate governance in Germany is regulated by a combination of the statutory law and the voluntary codes. The German Corporate Governance Code provides a recommendation and the suggestions for good and responsible corporate governance, although the adherence to the code is not legally mandatory. The next important feature of this model is focus on the long-term success. German corporate governance practices, they typically favor the long-term strategic planning over the short-term financial gains. The involvement of the various stakeholders in the decision-making process is thought to contribute to a more sustainable approach to managing the company. The German model of corporate governance has been both praised and criticized. The supporters argue that it fosters a more socially responsible and a stable form of capitalism by taking into account the interest of a broader group of stakeholders. However, the critiques have another story to tell. Let's see what the critiques have to say. The critiques suggest that the co-determination system can actually lead to huge conflicts of interest and show a slow decision-making process. So, despite such criticism, the German model has been successful for many German companies, particularly the large multinational corporations known for their global competitiveness and the innovation. The German model of the corporate governance has been both praised and criticized, and we have shown the reasons how. So, basically, despite such criticism, it is particularly known for taking care of the largest stakeholders in that case. The German model of corporate governance presents a unique set of advantages and the disadvantages. So, let's see. One of the clear advantages of the German model of corporate governance is a clearer allocation of responsibilities. The German model potentially allows for a cleaner allocation of responsibilities between the individuals and the corporate bodies, enhancing the transparency and accountability within the organizations. Enhanced executive director liability. Now, in this model, executive director liability does not automatically affect the members of the supervisory panel, leading to a more structured and less risky governance framework. The next important advantage of this particular model, that is a German model of corporate governance, is a flexible supervisory panel. The supervisory panel in the German model is less formal, more flexible, more cost efficient, providing a forum for strategic decisions and high-level operational issues within the companies. Now, the modern and the transparent system is another advantage of the German model of corporate governance. Adopting the German model could potentially move the overall corporate culture towards a more modern and transparent system of corporate management aligning with the international best practices. Now, basically, the next important point is the efficient management for the private equity. The features of the German model makes it a viable option for the private equity industry in Italy, enabling efficient management for portfolio companies and a closer monitoring of the managers. So, these were the proper advantages of the German model, what we have comprehended as of now. Now, these advantages are extremely good because it has the overall advantages of taking care of a larger scale of the stakeholders with a more efficient management for the private equity, and also about the other aspects which are very, very pertinent and important. Thank you so much.